so that when we retire, we know what are we going to do than to rely on government.
Yeah,
but they're saying nothing, Sissy. Nothing, Sissy.
Mr. Ndlovu, as far as I can recall, they actually have been a number of imbizos held in different parts of the country around the issue of stock theft. In different provinces even. So perhaps the issue is maybe in your particular area you feel that it hasn't been addressed.
It hasn't been, Sissy. It hasn't been. They never come to our place and talk about it.
Because in KZN, there's been an imbizo in Limpopo, in the Free State, and some of those also quite well reported on because farmers and just people who keep livestock were raising the matter of stock theft and the fact that it's such a challenge for police to investigate, especially in rural towns.
Yeah. I wish they can come to Midval also. They announce, we'll come and listen to them. Maybe they can advise us what must we do, what should we do, Sissy. We are suffering in Midval.
Have you been a victim, Mr. Ndlovu?
Several times, dear. Several times. We are trying to patrol at night, but we are scared. Because these guys, they got guns. They shoot to kill, Sissy. There's no warning shot. And
what kind of livestock do you keep?
I have cattle and goats. So we are trying now to form like something like a group, of farmers. We come together. We trying to we build a big, crawl so that all our livestock can stay inside in one area. But we are not winning these wars. We are not winning because they come and shoot. This guy shot the guns, in the air. You can't wait. You have to run away, sister.
Sure.
Yeah, and you can hear those guns. They're not small guns, like big guns, sister. We're scared. We are scared. Really, we are scared. We don't know what to do. Really.
All right.
Because we are suspecting these guys are from Lesotho, like I said before.
All right.
We have
all right,
no
Mr. Ndlovu.
of that.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. And again, I'm sorry about the experience that you've been having. I can hear that obviously it can be very scary being confronted by criminals head on in that way. Perhaps there's something that you can do, raising it with your municipality as well, to see what interventions you can come up with collectively. It's one of those problems that really does require a collaborative effort. All right, it's time for the latest news update.
Thank you, Cathy. In your top stories, a court delivers judgment on NA Speaker's bid to avoid arrest and 15 suspects to appear in court over the Fort Hare murders. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria is delivering the judgment in the urgent interdict application by National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. The Speaker last week launched the application seeking to prevent the state from effecting an arrest against her. This follows corruption allegations leveled against her during her tenure as the defense minister. Our reporter Kenny Mapanga has more.
So what essentially she was trying to do is to get that interim relief pending the arrival or the return of her lawyers, which we understand would only be available in this first week of April. So we'll see today whether the court actually dismisses that application or in fact grants her that interdict. If the court does grant her that interdict, then it leaves us with quite a significant legal precedent here in South Africa with respect to the criminal justice system and whether you can negotiate your handing over or halt your arrest or ask for full information before you subject yourself to the criminal justice system.
In some election-related news, the Umkhonto weSizwe Party says it will appeal the decision by the IEC to uphold an objection brought against former President and MK Party leader Jacob Zuma as a candidate for the party on its list of people to go to Parliament after the May 29 polls. Today is the deadline for people to lodge applications against objections made against them at the Electoral Court. The decision to omit Zuma was taken following the public candidate list inspection process which took place last week. MK Party spokesperson is Ntlamulo Ndlela.
Umkhonto weSizwe as a party, as you would know, through the court process that we won in the electoral court, is going to be on the ballot paper. That's one thing that ought to be clear, because there's a notion that President Zuma's face or that a leader's face ought to be in the ballot, and I think that's a wrong view of it. It is the actual emblem or the logo of a political party that's going to be there. So it's not a face per se.
Civil society organization DSA has expressed concern over the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, which seeks to revise essential education laws in the country. The organization says not enough public sentiment or opinion has been considered as far as the bill is concerned. The bill has stirred up controversy and courted widespread criticism from opposition parties as well as civil society groups. They are concerned about the criminalization of parents and caregivers whose children are not attending school. Noluma is DSA spokesperson.
Our purpose was to give the public to participate and have their say on this ballot bill. And for this bill alone, we had more than 90% of people who have said they are not for this bill. And those people, of course, they are parents who have concerns around this bill. So our sentiment, of course, is that the parents are concerned and they are showing quite a frustration when it comes to the bill, because some of them, they have said that they feel that when it comes to the education of this country, it is becoming now more politicized.
Police Minister Peggy Cele, together with National Police Commissioner Fadima Semula, are expected to attend the court case of the 15 suspects who have been arrested in connection with the murder cases at the University of Fort Hare in the Eastern Cape. The suspects will make their first appearance before the Dimbaza Magistrates Court today. The suspects have been arrested in connection with the killing of Vice-Chancellor's bodyguard Mboneli Vesele and the university's fleet manager Beatrice Roots. They are facing a string of charges such as fraud, kidnapping, murder and attempted murder. The murder trial of the 5 accused in the July 2022 killing of Collins Chabane Mayor Moses Maluleke is this morning expected to resume at the High Court in Polokwane, Limpopo. The trial was previously postponed due to the unavailability of the presiding judge, Violet Semenya. Maluleke was shot and killed at his home in Shikundu village. The accused, Shumanine Matsotsi, Isaac Mutau, Wiseman Baloi, Funzo Litzebe, Chen Chiane Omonyawi each faced several charges, including one of murder and another of attempted murder. The trial has been scheduled for 2 weeks. And finally, a US-based charity says 7 of its aid workers, mostly foreign nationals, have been killed in an Israeli airstrike. The World Central Kitchen, which distributes food, called the deaths a tragedy. The BBC's Yolande Nell reports.
Video shot at Deir Bala Hospital in central Gaza shows the bodies of several aid workers and their foreign passports. They're wearing clothing including bulletproof vests bearing the World Central Kitchen logo. The organisation says it served more than 40 million meals to people in Gaza since the start of the war. It's also been involved in sending the first aid to the war-torn territory by sea from Cyprus. A convoy of cars from the charity was attacked while driving along Gaza's coastal road. Israel's military said it was conducting a thorough review at the highest levels to understand the circumstances of what it called a tragic incident.
Recapping your top story, the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has started delivering judgment in the urgent interdict application by National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. Your headlines at 10:30 with N. Musa for SAFM News. My name is Luyanda Maume and I'm out.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, it's 7 after 10 o'clock. You're listening to the second hour of the show. Thank you for tuning in. Of course, coming up in this hour, we'll be talking finance with Brian Hirsch, but Brian not in for today, so Brandon is stepping in for him. Before we get into it, I want to take you live to the High Court. This is where the ruling on the Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula's interdict against any potential arrest is taking place. Judge Sulet Potterell is delivering that ruling.
application is not for the mere asking. Rule 6 in brackets 12 in brackets B sets out, and I quote, in an urgent application, an applicant must set out forth explicitly the circumstances which averred render the matter urgent and the reasons why the applicant claims that the applicant would not be afforded redress at a hearing in due course. The locus classicus of Luna Meubelvervaardigers Edensburg versus Macon and another, trading as making furniture manufacturers, 1977 4 SA 135W bears repeating. I quote, the degree of relaxation should not be greater than the necessity of the urgency that the case is. It must be commensurate therewith. Mere lip service to the requirements of Rule 6 in brackets 12B will not do, and an applicant must make out a case in the founding affidavit to justify the particular extent of the departure from the norm which is involved in the time and day for which the matter must be set down. I close the quote. The Gauteng Pretoria Practice Manual, contained in Volume 3 of Erasmus, sets out how urgent applications must be brought before court. On page 82/137 in bracket 6, it reads as follows. The rules ensures an orderly flow of applications to the court and their expeditious adjudication. Rule 612 allows an applicant who requires relief urgently to have his case decided without the delays necessitated by the ordinary procedure. However, the normal times will be abridged and the deviation from Rule 6 will be permitted only when the matter is urgent. The degree of abridgment and deviation must be commensurate with the case and must be justified in the founding affidavit. On page H2139, under 4 brackets 2, the following is said. The abridgment of times and the deviation from a rule must be justified. If the matter is not heard immediately, the applicant will not be afforded substantial redress, and both these matters must be pertinently dealt with in the affidavits filed in support of this application. The court has to decide whether the matter is so urgent that the timelines are justified and the urgency is not self-created, because, I quote, where the application lacks the requisite element or degree of urgency, the court can for that reason decline to exercise its power under Rule 612B. The matter is then not properly on the court's roll, and it can decline to hear it. The appropriate order is generally to strike the application from the roll. And I quote from Commissioner for South African Revenue Services versus Hawker Air Services Pty Limited, Commissioner for South African Revenue Service versus Hawker Aviation Services Partnership and others, 2006, in brackets 4, SA 292 SCA. The Constitutional Court in a party and another versus Minister of Home Affairs and another, Maloko and others versus Minister of Home Affairs and another, 2009-3, SA 649 CC, at paragraph 65, found that launching applications on such short notice and at the very latest date should be avoided, as it places undue pressure on the parties and the court. In Economic Freedom Fighters and others versus Chairperson of the Powers of Privileges Committee and others, 2024 ZAWCHC 31, dated 8 February 2024, it was found that one day notice the respondents with the court, and I quote, to digest the contents thereof so that the matter could be heard and judgment handed down in the space of 1 day or 2 thereafter was wholly unreasonable. With that background, the court has to decide this urgency. In this matter, the application was filed on a Saturday. The respondent was to oppose the matter by email or extraordinarily by means of WhatsApp on the Sunday by 1600 hours on the same day. Saturday, the 23rd of March 2024, and to deliver any opposing affidavit by no later than 1600 hours on Sunday, 24 March 2024, with the matter set down for Monday, 25 March 2024. The court was expected to hear this matter on Monday at 10 o'clock. The respondent's answering affidavit was filed on Monday, and the matter stood down till 1500 hours for the applicant to decide whether it was to reply, for the court to have time to read the answering affidavit in between the other 20 urgent applications this court had on its roll. The court managed to read the answering affidavit and entertain the matter at 1500 hours. The applicant had decided not to file a reply. It is patently clear that none of the practice directives of this court was adhered to. The time frames in terms of Rule 612 were unreasonable, not only to the respondents, but to the court. It was argued that despite these shortcomings, the urgency is so patent as it stems from the threat to arrest the applicant without a due and lawful process. And the whole premise of the applicant's case is 1, the applicant standing in society, 2, there is an unlawful prosecution, 3, the arrest will be unlawful, and 4, the applicant's constitutional right to dignity and freedom of movement will be infringed. Arrest is a means to process a suspect and have an appearance before court. The respondent set this out in the answering affidavit, but it is trite. The applicant, by means of her attorney, sets out in the main application prior to this application that the NDDP does not even intend to oppose bail. This was already in the main application set out, making it clear that detention was not an issue. In the answering affidavit to this application, the NDDP confirms that it will not oppose bail. Arrest without detention simply is not urgent. It is most certainly not within the power of this court to instruct the minister and his officials to summons the applicant versus to arrest her. There is in any way no such prayer sought in the application before me. I cannot find this, firstly because there are no grounds set out as to why this should be done, except that the applicant's standing in society and her dignity. The NDPP has stated under oath that her attorney can take her to the Littleton police station and the attorney can take her to the court. This is already a courtesy and an exception to what ordinary citizens are afforded. There is not a single fact set out as why to the future arrest will be unlawful, seemingly because there is a weak case made out. Yet the applicant does not know what case has been set out, and this is pure speculation. I can make no finding on such speculation that there will be an unlawful arrest or that there is a weak case. These facts cannot underpin urgency. The respondents argued that it would not be competent for this court to interdict an arrest. I'm in full agreement with this submission, not on the facts presented, but more importantly, a court has to take cognizance of the fact that if the court grants such an order, the floodgates will be opened. Every suspect will be in a position to approach a court on an urgent basis, setting out on speculation that there is a weak case against it and interdict an arrest. Any suspect would merely have to set out in a founding affidavit that arrest in future will be unlawful. The whole criminal justice system will fail and will be controlled by suspects. This applicant has been ensured that Section 40 will only be utilized if she does not present herself to the police station. The applicant has failed to do so for 2 weeks. The fact that Section 40 will only be utilized if she does not present her to the police station, is in complete compliance with the standing orders, which sets out that arrest should be a last resort. I was referred to the matter of President of the Republic of South Africa versus Zuma and others, 2023 11 SACR 610 Gauteng Division paragraphs 8 to 10, that it would not be an overreach for this court to interdict arrest, but a bench exercising judicial oversight, if I should interdict the arrest. The matter is not comparable and does not sway me that I'm entitled to judicial oversight of this nature. Firstly, nowhere in that matter does the court find a court has judicial oversight to interdict an arrest. Second, in that matter, the summons was before court, and a plethora of grounds regarding its validity on the face thereof raised. In this matter, no arrest has been made, and no unlawfulness on its own has been explained to court, excepting for pure speculation being raised. Furthermore, the court in that matter found that National Treasury and others versus Opposition to Tolling Alliance 2012 in brackets 6 SA 223 CC was not applicable in that matter due to it being a private prosecution. The OTA case had held that where it sought for an interdict for a statutory authority from performing a function within its remit, a higher threshold existed than when seeking such relief against a private litigant, as in this instance. Much reliance was placed on the fact that the applicant has a right to legal representation of her choice. Clearly, the NDPP and the police investigator is aware of this right and has afforded her ample time to report to the Little Police Station with a legal representative. Mr. Piramore, already on 9 March 2024, had asked who her legal representative is. On 17 March 2024, the legal representative for the first time made contact with Piramore. The delay in processing the applicant was done out of courtesy. It was made clear that it was not a negotiation and was not open-ended. Mr. Mayer set out that due to a long trial in Durban, he is only available on 3 April 2024. I was referred to Section 35 of the Constitution and Section 73 of the CPA. Firstly, all of those sections refer to an accused or an arrest or a detained person, which are no construction this applicant before the court is. But accepting that pre-arrest there is for informational duties in terms of Section 73(2)(a, with these duties arising at the time of the arrest of the accused is entitled to legal representation. This right does not include that a legal representative dictate when a police official acting in terms of its authority has to fulfill its duties. The averment that the respondents don't want an attorney present for her to incriminate herself is pure speculation and flies in the face of Paramore and the NDPP attempting to secure an attorney to be present at her arrest. Already at the gatehouse, the applicant is afforded legal representation. She has been afforded a right to legal representation in the pre-trial and pre-arrest stage. A court cannot interdict to prevent statutory authorities to comply with their statutory duties. And it is not as if the state representatives have been not lenient and has let 2 weeks go by. The prayer that I take judicial peak is for the court to determine whether an arrest would be unlawful. In reply on behalf of the applicant pursuant to a question by this court, it was submitted that I only need to take a peek into the docket if I'm uncertain. I'm not uncertain, and I exercise my discretion not to take a judicial peek. This court is not a means to declare an arrest which has not taken place unlawful, or that it would be unlawful, or express a view thereon. I am therefore also not granting this order. Although I do not address all the issues raised, it does not mean I did not consider it. No remedy is pertaining to the search and seizure. The respondents deny the media leaks emanate from their officers or agents, but in any event, no remedy is sought pertaining to any leaks. In the applicant's affidavit, there are a variety of emotive garnishing on which a court unfortunately cannot take cognizance and make factual decisions on that. However, even if the court finds that the matter is not urgent, the court must still make sure that there is substantial redress in a hearing in due course. Not in the founding affidavit of this application or in the main application is any fact set out. This requisite in terms of Rule 612B and the Practice Directive is not at all addressed in the founding affidavit. But even if I consider it, despite the applicant setting out any of these facts before me, even if I should consider it, then also pursuant to a question by this court, whether this court would not be deciding already the matter as it seeks the same relief pertaining to arrest in the main application, counsel for the applicant strongly argued that that court would make a final ruling, as this is just an interdict. In that case, the applicant will have substantial redress in a hearing to follow. As for the costs must follow the result. Both parties asked for costs, including the costs of two counsel. According, the application is struck from the roll. The applicant is to pay the costs, including the costs of two counsel. The court will adjourn.
All right, and there you have it then, Judge Sulette Pottrell delivering her ruling in the Speaker's bid to try and interdict her arrest, and she has failed in that attempt this morning. The court finding that there was no reasonable grounds for the application to have been made, not on the issue of urgency, saying that in fact it is not an urgent matter and that the timeframes were unreasonable for the court. And of course, then there are also the merits of the case as outlined by Judge Pottrell, and saying in setting out really the applicant as case in this regard, which is the applicant of the Speaker of Parliament, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, which is that, her standing in society would be affected by this arrest, that her arrest was unlawful, that it would impugn her dignity and her right to freedom of movement and her rights in the Constitution. But the court worried about the fact that, number one, there's an issue of process and procedure that is being carried out by statutory bodies, which is the police and the investigative directorate that is behind all of this. And it says it does not have the jurisdiction to actually interfere with those processes. And also going further to say that it is not within the ambit of the court to direct who can be arrested and who not. It is not a legal right for one to be able to fight their arrest. Judge Pottrell saying that if the court were to follow that precedent, it would open up the floodgates and you would have suspects that are controlling what is happening. The suspects would be in charge, is what the court has had to say, and that it would indicate a failure of the criminal justice system if it were to be controlled by suspects, that they would be able to say when they could be arrested and have a voice in those matters, because ultimately that's why you have a trial. That's the opportunity that it presents. The court also feeling that Ms. Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula had already been given a courtesy that many South Africans are not afforded, which is the fact that there were talks for her to hand herself over, and that arrest would only be effected if she failed to hand herself over. And that is a process that is not afforded to many ordinary South Africans. So already she had received special treatment than what everybody else is entitled to. So really here it seems that it's now back to her handing herself over to the Littleton police station. Of course, there is still room for her to appeal this particular judgment. One wonders then what would happen in the case of appeal, and whether the investigative directorate would move on this particular issue, because either way the court is saying, well, they don't get to say who must be arrested, when and how, and even an insinuation that there's a process that is 2 weeks overdue, as the court has rightfully outlined, because she was supposed to hand herself over already 2 weeks ago, and that has not happened. Instead, we've had this matter unfolding. So, quite a significant blow then for the Speaker of Parliament when it comes to this particular matter. Of course, it also takes place as the acting Speaker has agreed for a motion of no confidence in the Speaker to be heard by the National Assembly. All right, so that's your news just in out of the North Gauteng High Court. It is 10:30. We're going to take you to the latest news headlines, and then on the other side of this, we talk finance.
Thank you, Cathy. In your headlines, the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has struck off the roll and urgent interdict application by National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. The Speaker last week lodged the application seeking to prevent the state from effecting an arrest against her. In another developing story, a 51-year-old suspect who was arrested after he crashed into former President Jacob Zuma's car last week has been granted bail of 500 rand by the Eshowe Magistrates Court in Northern KZN. Mbuyiseni Ntuli has been charged with drunken driving, reckless and negligent driving. And foreign and justice ministers from a number of countries are due to meet in The Hague later today for an international conference on Ukraine. The Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba will also take part in the talks. Details on these and other stories at 11 with N. Musa. Cathy has your SAFM market update.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand currently trading at 18 rand 85 to the dollar, 23 rand 67 to the pound, and 20 rand 24 to the euro. Markets in Asia closed in mixed terrain. The JSE is green across the board in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are higher this hour. Gold is trading at $2,261. Platinum $913 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $87.20 a barrel.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
The Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, believes in the power of transformation and driving sustainable economic growth. We're not just financiers. We're architects of opportunity and partners in shaping our communities for a shared, brighter tomorrow. Our mandate for inclusivity in the economy is the reason we fund Black industrialists, Black-owned companies, women, and youth-empowered enterprises. Speak to us for tailored funding support and let us catalyze industries and create jobs together. The IDC.
Star-crossed meetings between wild animals and people sometimes happen. In fact, they happen more often than we think. Some very special people in Africa find themselves in these highly unusual friendships, and they wouldn't change it for the world. The only word that can really describe what they're experiencing is love. We follow these poignant stories and show the rest of the world how love goes wild. Channel your best adventure with Love Goes Wild, weekdays at 4:30 p.m. only on S3.
Talking finance, making sense of your finance.
All right, right, rather late than never. Good morning, Brandon.
Good morning, Cathy.
Thank you so much for coming into studio today, and apologies that we're starting late. We had to kick it off with the court for the significant ruling pending the speaker's, should we say, imminent arrest if she fails to hand herself over, but at least we're still able to get to some of the segment that we had planned for.
Well, I think it's, we're waiting for that. I think it's once again playing out. I mean, my just one opinion on it is one's always encouraged when the executive and the legislature and the judiciary have these separate arms and they do work. I was quite anxious around the word peeking, where you're asking a judge to have a peek at a docket and see whether there was merit to it or not. So, again, I think that's just, the arms of the state working as they should. So,
and the courts always have such a way of bringing clarity into matters, right? So I think that the judgment was very well articulated, but could still well be challenged on appeal. We'll have to wait and see.
Got those rights.
Yeah, if those are part of the steps that the speaker chooses to exercise. So, Brandon, on our desk for today is we all know that at some point or another we're going to need to retire. Although these days people seem to be retiring in name. They don't actually retire. People are working until later and later in life.
Yeah, so I mean, effectively, if you think about retirement, it's one of two concepts. You're either forced to stop at a certain age, you're fixed retirement age 60 or 65 or something like that, or it's at that point where you have financial freedom, where you have enough money that your money can work for you and you don't have to work for money any longer. So the idea of it, retirement is a vast unknown of how long are we going to be retired for before we sort of pass on. And that in many instances, due to longevity, is a lot longer than many people ever thought was possible. And hence why, if you can sort of keep working or doing some consulting or ad hoc work here and there, you endeavour to do so, or you have a part-time hobby that generates a bit of income. Many people are having to resort to that because they just don't have a big enough pot of money to last you long enough. I think that's
Do you think that the retirement age, whether it's globally, whether it's locally, that we're likely to see that coming under review in time, simply because people are living for so much longer than was expected?
Absolutely. I think the longevity issue and medical advances have forced it. And already we've seen it around the world. I think the UK and France recently, I think more recently in the last 2 years, tried to up its retirement age for its government employee sort of base. And that was met with a lot of resistance because people felt they'd worked long and hard enough and they didn't feel like working an additional 2 years or whatever it was. But it's a funding mechanism. People, the whole model of retirement in certain pension funds where you get a guaranteed pension are based on longevity, and when the actuarial models sort of become distorted, it no longer works, or you need more capital put aside to fund it, and you turn to taxpayers essentially to fund that in the cases of government pensions and things like that. So it is a concern, and everybody's got to manage it. So any person who's ever run a business knows the term cash flow, and they learn it very quickly. And retirement is about cash flow. Is what money do you have coming to you and if you mess that up along the way, your same for a business person, your retirement can be messed up, and your business can go under when you get cash flows wrong. But it's a concept of, and that's what we're sort of alluding to here, is how best to manage your cash flows and what to watch out for when you're retired.
One of the important things, of course, is just around the fact that when you have a conversation around retirement, in as much as it is about the future, it's a conversation that starts today, right?
Absolutely.
So whether or not you're thinking about retirement or about to retire is really not the point. The point is that wherever you are today, you have to start practically looking at what are the measures and plans that you have in place today, so that come that age or at that point of retirement, you're actually able to retire comfortably.
Yes. So, I mean, you're 100% correct in that we've got to start it way before you get to retirement age, and you've got to start putting a plan together. And it is difficult because you're going through stages of life, and if you don't start putting stuff away, you'll find yourself later on, and the benefit of that compounding of interest or compound growth that you have over many years of investing, and getting into the good habits of good financial management, personal financial management. The time goes by quickly, and you're a lot younger than I am, so it's like, and can assure you it does move along quickly, and with young kids and things like that, next thing you look and suddenly, jeepers, I've only got a few more years to go, and what do I have to do? And the mountain becomes insurmountable, in fact.
It's always difficult trying to figure out what it is that one needs to do today in order to be well prepared and to save for retirement. But is there a formula? I remember reading an article. I was a young professional at the time, and they had these ratios in this article. They say, 50%, you can spend about 35% on your home, 20% on your car, and then try to split the rest up between income. Is there a ratio that is a good ratio for us to kick off with, to say, actually, if X percentage of my income is going towards retirement, then I know that I'm doing the best that I can?
So I think I don't know about the ratios, because that can vary quite considerably with different people with their sort of the amounts that they earn and their standard of living and things like that. But I've always encouraged people whenever they ask, where should I be? I think there's a great principle of pay yourself first, which is put away at the beginning of the month money for yourself, for your longer term savings. So get into the discipline, because if you make it savings last, then the money's gone during the month. You use very quickly. So, and then how much should be putting? And as a youngster, if you're starting off and let's say your first job, you come out of university and you're 22 and you get your first job, endeavor to be putting away at least 10% into longer term savings, and as you get older, that should be sort of growing. 10% is the absolute sort of minimum. And you need to do it for a number of years, from 22 say to 65, is be putting away that amount. If you only start at 32, then that number jumps up at least to 15% or 20. So getting into the habit right nice and early, it will give you a base retirement plan. 10% will that even in it of itself is a sort of safety net approach. That's not going to make you retire being very wealthy relative to your standard of living when you do retire. So it's I work on that ratio, because the rest of it, the amount of cars, the price of a new car, etc., you take that over 5 years, or homes as well. I mean, we've had and interest rates come along and throw people. I mean, shame everybody who's been hit in the last 2 years with interest rates suddenly going up. They thought they were putting away 20% to their home. Now suddenly every month they're having to put away 25%. So you do get a lot of hardships that come along, and there's cycles to that thing. So you've got to weather it.
So the safe figure then for you to be putting away into retirement is what?
Well, I say absolute minimum of 10 and going upwards to at least 20.
Absolute minimum of 10% of your income, whatever that income might be. Okay. So what else do we need in place to actually structure this retirement, to structure our retirement plan for today?
So I know that there Brian has mentioned sort of a retirement formula, and there are many spreadsheets and applications and things like that. There's a very simple rule that the Americans came out with that they used to use in their financial planning arena, which was the 4% rule. Is the day that you retire, if you're using 4% of your capital, so if you have R1 million, you can use 4%, which is 40,000 rand of income in the year that you retire for that million. And if you start there and you then have your money the capital invested, you've got a good you're most likely going to have a very good outcome in that, using that number. The Americans, in reviewing it now, are saying that even that 4% is too cautious. So and in South Africa, I'd probably say 6.5% to 7% is a number that people could comfortably be looking at in our environment. So if you have R1 million, that's going to give you about 60,000 rand worth of income. Remember, it's got to go up each year by inflation. You've got to keep the capital growing, and you don't know how long you're going to live for. So it's got to carry on. So it's a difficult one, but starting off a bit conservative, and you have to make plans for contingencies. So it is difficult. So I like to say, think of trying to have enough capital that you can live off 5 or 6% of the capital. Is a good target to have.
Brendan, I must say, this is the part where conversations about retirement absolutely stress me out.
They do.
Because how are you supposed to live annually on this income? So let's say you do have R1 million, right? Living on 4% of that annually in about 30 years' time is practically impossible, right? So now you need to be a multi-millionaire when you go into retirement just so that you're going to be okay. Is that even practical? I don't know that it is.
Well, our statistics show that it isn't practical for many people. It is very, very difficult because we go through cycles, and I think even some of the legislation that's out there now with the two-pot retirement thing is trying to make it more compulsory savings. I know that the two-pot system is allowing people to access a bit, but it's also trying to force that at least 2/3 of the investments will be put aside and be there for a pension for people. And when you then move companies, it's sort of preserved for you. So it's that idea of forcing the savings. So it should then, if those intentions work out, and in theory they should. Work out quite well for people. It will help the program. But Cathy, under no illusions that it is hard, and it requires a discipline of just putting away. That's why I use that principle of pay yourself first. Is just start off. Any youngster that comes and asks for advice from any of us financial planners is just put away 10% or to 15% and just start that habit. Do not spend it. Just put it away, and then you can start spending the rest if you think about it, and build your lifestyle standard on what that rest is. Buy the cars that are appropriate for whatever that number is if you're earning a good number. And those are the habits that, for many of us, it's too far along. Maybe our parents should have given us better financial planning lessons or things like that. But I think that's why we're here today, is to try and get that message out. Is please make some long, hard, considerations for the future.
I think part of what is also obvious then is that many of us are living way beyond our means, right? But how do you begin to have a true sense of that? So if 10 to 15% of my income should be going towards retirement, does that include any current savings, like savings for tomorrow? Not savings for retirement, just for when I have a rainy day tomorrow, because chances are I might not be able to access my retirement savings. And then the carryover from that conversation is, it takes me back to the example of the ratio that I started off with, Brendan, like practically then.
So I think the starting savings is a number of steps. If you sit there and you say to somebody, save R1 million, and they just think, that is absolutely impossible. But if you break it down into a few steps, the very first one would be that emergency fund that you allude to, is save 1 month's worth of income. Because if you can save that, get that saved away for a contingency when you might have something go wrong, etc., that you don't have to go into debt for, then you're well on your way. Once you've got that saved up, then you can look to next sort of part of it is clean out all the bad debt in your life, which might be sort of the credit cards, clothing account, those high interest sort of things. Your things like your vehicle and your home tend to be longer term debt and are reasonable interest rates generally relative to some of the others. So clear out that, and then start, carry on with the savings of build up, shorter term. Children's education savings might be a shorter term goal that you or medium term goal that people put in place. So, but at the end of the day, if you've got an emergency fund saved and you keep that in place somehow through until now, when you get to retirement, it's all the assets that you have. So it all comes together. It doesn't, your emergency fund or the short-term savings don't disappear. You just carry on building, but it's sequential. It's actually just taking the first step. Don't worry about the long-term, 4%, I need, 5 million rand saved. Just start the first one. Get to 50,000 or to 100,000, etc. And folk, I always think of when we study, we tend to, it's probably the one time in our life when we're most focused. We know, okay, matric are better, get my act together and study. So, and where do people perform the best is when they're focused on one thing. And it's the same here, is set yourself a goal that's achievable in the shorter term or something that you can attain. So putting aside 1 month's salary, save it. Try and save that in the next 12 months or something. If you get there, then you build up from there. Builds a sense of achievement. This thing is overwhelming. Otherwise, you just fall into a state of despair and you give up. Please don't give up, because there isn't a safety net.
I was going to say, if somebody is listening, perhaps they are a professional, maybe not so young anymore, but as they try to do the numbers, it becomes clear that, look, I've probably fallen behind here due to life or whatever other circumstances. I'm not where I should be, and I'm getting closer and closer to, whether it's 50 to your retirement years. What can those people do? So if people are in their 40s, Brandon, and they're having to say, okay, how do I make the most of these last remaining 15, 20 years before I have to go into retirement?
So, I think the thing that one mustn't forget is, even as you start saving, remember the first sort of 1,000 rand that you save. If we got a great return this year, 20% return, you're only going to get 200 rand on that 1,000 rand. So it's not going to be meaningful really in the greater scheme of changing your life materially. But if you've been saving along and you get to 40 and you already have R1 million rand somehow saved, and you get a year of good returns where you get 20%, suddenly 200,000 rand is being added to your pot without you making one single piece of effort. And that's the benefit of it, is that over time the investment returns will help you achieve a lot of it. So as you build it, you're getting, and then build, interest on interest type of thing. So the journey gets easier for you as time goes by. So just once again, just start off. Even if you've got nothing in place, please just put together a small little plan, very basic. Just set yourself one objective and focus on that. Don't try and do everything. When we're trying to hunt too many rabbits, we get none.
Yeah, I guess sometimes following a conversation like this, Brandon says, try and save 10% of your salary towards retirement, and I think I'm falling behind. I'm going to make it 25%, and you know already that your chances of success are going to be minimal because after month one it just looks impossible. And
Yes, no, just start it, and do what you can, but
Brendan, I've got a couple of questions for you. We're going to kick it off with this WhatsApp voice note. It's on retirement annuities in particular.
Morning, Katie. Katie, I want to ask you, what about this thing of new retirement annuity savings that we're going to be accessed at the 1st of September this year. So I want to ask him, if for instance, can you please explain for me, if for instance I have 1 million on my pension fund, how much can I able to withdraw? Thank you, Katie. Have a nice show.
Okay, so as for my understanding is that up to a maximum, so of your vested amount, that's the vested pot, so up to, about on the 31st of August, whatever's in your pot of money, that 1 million that he refers to, they will allow up to a maximum of 30,000 Rand to be put into the sort of cash pot, where you be able to make a withdrawal, and you're allowed to make one withdrawal, minimum of 2,000 Rand per year, up to whatever's in that pot for that year.
So it doesn't matter whether you've got 1 million, whether you've got 5 million, whether you've got 600,000 in your pension savings right now.
Yeah.
The point is that you can only access 30,000, up to 30,000.
Up to 30,000, yeah.
All right.
So I think the intention, and it's been stated again now, is that this is to sort of help people avoid that sort of absolute destitute sort of economic events where they are so, and so 30,000 generally does help people. Accessing the full 1 million, that gives people a lifestyle thing and might help a bit, but that isn't the intention. It is, so that may still be changed. I think there's still a bit of, debate around whether 30,000 is sufficient or what does that mean. And the investment houses are quite anxious about how much money might be pulled out very rapidly. It's very hard to quantify how dire that need is at the moment. So it'll be interesting come September.
All right. Thanks for that, Brendan. Steve, you're in Soweto. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Cathy.
Yes.
Brendan, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, in the past there was only pension fund before the introduction of the Provident Fund.
Steve, just try and move around a bit. The connection to you isn't great. I'm actually struggling to hear you.
Can I still
Yeah, that's
now?
much better. That's much better.
Much better. In the past, Brendan, there was pension fund, right? And I remember the unions actually forced the government, then or the regulators, then to introduce Provident Fund.
Yes.
Of which they were citing that, the pension fund, even if you're out of employment, you cannot actually access it. Whereas with the Provident Fund, you can access it. And you can access both your contribution as a worker and what the company is actually contributing. Right? Those were the unions at that time.
Yes.
And now the unions already they're still, wanting an access, or either their members to access the pension funds. And also this pot system that is being introduced. But now the question is, when are the unions going to stop to do that? Because eventually, when the people are actually retired, they'll be having nothing else.
No, so I agree that I think this endeavour now with this two-pot retirement system is a significant sort of step. Towards reducing the sort of ease with which the Provident Fund. I think that the real thing with the Provident Fund and the pension fund was when you got to retirement age, with your Provident Fund, you could take out the full amount as cash, pay a whole lot of tax, but you could take out the full amount. With the pension fund, 2/3 had to remain invested to give you a monthly pension. So you had some degree of security. But that was hard fought over. I think that was in the 1980s. Trade unions sort of held a lot of, they sort of forced business to make that big concession, and the state obviously legislated accordingly. And now they're trying to sort of sort that out. It did create a bit of a bad habit, and I think this next step of the two-pot system, if it gets on. Unfortunately, what we've got to try and do is get the economic growth so that we have more people on pension funds. There's too much of an informal economy where nobody's contributing to pension funds. So we've got that problem which we're not addressing easily in the country at the moment. So that's in the formal sector, it should be a lot better that people, if they work in there, their retirement outcome should be better than what it was previously.
All right. Thanks for that response, Brendan. We are quickly running out of time. I'm going to take this voice note, and you'll see how quickly you can respond afterwards.
Sure, let's go for it.
Hi, Cathy and Brendan. I wonder if you can help me. I'm already on retirement. If I have R1 million and then I wish to provide for my medical aid and also be able to keep my insurances. How do I look? What can I do? Any advice? Do I have I want a medical aid that will last me for life, which I don't know how long will I live. But for now, my health is okay. Yes, and I also wish to keep my life insurances for my children. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I think the hard part here is just really of managing this cash flow, the capital of R1 million, finding a medical aid, an appropriate one that you can afford, as well as trying to keep the life assurances. Life insurance is a bit of a grudge purchase, isn't it? We have it when we need it for our children or when we've got a lot of debt. Keeping it into retirement, unfortunately, many people do stop their life assurance, and one of her options may be for her children to take over the premiums of that life assurance as a possibility to help alleviate that problem, knowing that they'll be the beneficiaries at some point in time of it. But it's a tough, I think that example is exactly what we're trying to help people be aware of before they get to retirement.
Yeah, and I guess it's also part of the real conversations that families can be having.
Absolutely.
In fact, I've heard of families that pool together to pay and contribute towards life insurances. Do you see a lot of that in your business?
I think it's becoming more important because a family does need, there are cash flow needs, and children are being asked to support their parents, so they're sacrificing some of their potential for their own retirement savings and to help their elderly parents. So it's a bit of a, I think wherever communities get together and work together, the results tend to be better. I would say that as a general rule of thumb.
Brendan, thank you so much for stepping in for Brian Hirsch today. Of course, Talking Finance back with you again next week, Tuesday. It's now time for your 11 o'clock news update.
In our top stories, Mapisa Nqakula's bid to block her arrest fails and a conference on alleged Russian war crimes in Ukraine. Good morning. The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has struck the urgent interdict application by the National Assembly Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa Nqakula, off the roll. The judge in the matter has also ordered the Speaker to pay the costs of the application. Judge Sulet Potterol found Mapisa Nqakula would have substantial redress in the main application, which is expected to be heard on the 9th of April this year, and therefore found the matter before the court was not urgent. The Speaker last week launched the application seeking to prevent the state from effecting an arrest against her. This follows corruption allegations levelled against her during her tenure as Defence Minister. Judge Potterol handed down the judgment.
Even if I should consider it, then also pursuant to a question by this court, whether this court would not be deciding already the matter as it seeks the same relief pertaining to arrest in the main application. Counsel for the applicant strongly argued that that court would make a final ruling as this is just an interdict. In that case, the applicant will have substantial redress in a hearing to follow. As for the cost must follow the result. According the application is struck from the roll, the applicant is to pay the costs, including the costs of due counsel.
A 51-year-old suspect was arrested after he crashed into former President Jacob Zuma's car last week, has been granted bail of 500 rand at the Ishowe Magistrates Court in northern KwaZulu-Natal. Mbuyiseli Ntuli has been charged with drunken driving and reckless and negligent driving. Police say the man's vehicle collided with former President Jacob Zuma's official armoured state vehicle. The incident happened on Thursday night on the R66 when Zuma was believed to be travelling between Nkandla and Ishowe. The case has been adjourned to the 3rd of May for further investigation. The University of Fort Hare in the Eastern Cape has welcomed the arrests of 15 additional suspects in connection with the murders at the institution. The arrested suspects include university staff members and some who are currently on suspension. The suspects are due to appear in court today. The arrests are in connection with the murder of Mboneli Visele, who was the bodyguard of the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Zakele Buhlungu, and fleet manager Pietrus Roets. University spokesperson J.P. Roet says the arrests bring a sense of comfort.
I think it's very important for us to just say that we are looking for closure. Almost a year and a half after the brutal murders of staff, failed assassination attempts. So we are saying we are very grateful to the very hard work by the National Task Team and also the provincial SAPS.
Civil society organisation DFSA has expressed concern over the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, which seeks to revise essential education laws in the country. The organisation says not enough public sentiment or opinion has been considered as far as the bill is concerned. The bill has stirred up controversy and courted widespread criticism from opposition parties as well as civil society groups. They are concerned about the criminalisation of parents and caregivers whose children are not attending school. Nolumake is the spokesperson.
Our purpose was to give the public to participate and have their say on this Bella bill. And for this bill alone, we had more than 90% of people who have said they are not for this bill. And those people, of course, they are parents who have concerns around this bill. So our sentiment, of course, is that the parents are concerned and they are showing quite a frustration when it comes to the bill, because some of them, they have said that they feel that when it comes to the education of this country, it is becoming now more politicized.
A 19-year-old woman has been arrested for allegedly killing her 27-year-old brother in Giyani, Limpopo. Police spokesperson Malisela Lidwaba says the two had an argument during which the deceased allegedly assaulted the suspect. Lidwaba says the suspect allegedly stabbed her brother on the upper body. The suspect is set to appear before the Giyani Magistrates Court soon, facing a murder charge.
Police rushed to the vicinity and upon arrival found the lifeless body of a 27-year-old male brother on the ground in a pool of blood. The deceased sustained stab wound on the upper body and was covered with a blanket. Preliminary investigation revealed that the argument ensued between the siblings and resulted in the deceased assaulting her sister. The sister took out a sharp object and stabbed her brother on the chest.
Further field and finally, foreign and justice ministers from a number of countries are due to meet in The Hague later today for an international conference on Ukraine. The Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba will also take part in the talks, the BBC's Anna Holligan reports.
The delegates will focus on the alleged atrocities committed in the 2 years since the start of the Russian invasion. Attacks on schools, hospitals, power plants, allegations of torture, rape and murder. There is a broad agreement on the need for these crimes to be documented, investigated and prosecuted. The ministers will discuss the most appropriate and feasible forum for any future trials to take place. They will also express support for long-term efforts to provide truth, justice and compensation for the victims.
Recapping the top story, the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has struck the urgent interdict application by the National Assembly Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, off the roll. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
#SAFM Talking Point.
Unforgettable happens when the young and the old know they can surf, snorkel, fish, enjoy whale watching, and end the day with sundowners Neshisanyama. KwaZulu-Natal is a jewel waiting to happen. Ziyakhipha. With hiking, horse riding, biking, ziplining, and mountain biking adventures waiting for the fearless and the bold. Unforgettable happens here. Zwagala. Brought to you by Tourism KwaZulu-Natal.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Good morning, Cathy. How are you? Mafuta here, Cathy. If there was any action that was going to support this action by Rise Mzansi to toy for jobs, for people inclusive to those who are above 35, because this age group is the one that is carrying most of the responsibilities in families. But this stands by government to say youngsters, even if those from school, should be provided with jobs. It's a symptom that government is scared about youngsters because they are the ones who are vocal and active and noise makers, but they are the ones who's got a very little responsibilities in families. So for me, people above the age of 35 should be provided with jobs and assistance to start their business because they're the ones who are supporting families, Cathy.
Good morning, Cathy. Hope you had a good Easter weekend. Yeah, pronunciations and everything, 12 official languages, all of that. But you know what? The price of petrol keeps going up, and that impacts inflation. That impacts the price of food. Have you seen the price of cheese lately? It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, why? Yeah, I don't know how we can afford to buy cheese anymore. It's just ridiculous. But then again, I suppose you wouldn't know what a nachi is, but it's actually a nachi. You know, 2 A's, not 1 A. So NATO and NATO is two totally different things.
Hey, SAFM. Anonymous here in KZN. I was listening to this gentleman Colin talking about pronunciation. Yeah, I mean, we all have different mother tongues. We all have different accents. So, yeah. So definitely we're going to be pronouncing different words in different languages differently. Like, for example, there was a time my dad said, buoyance. Buoyance, he's trying to say Beyonce. So instead of saying Beyonce, he said buoyance. So, yeah.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. This is Matebola. Yeah, indeed. What JCK Count is saying, it is truth. Electricity is very expensive, Cathy. 500 rand is nothing at all. And yeah, food again goes to petrol prices. You know, it is so painful. I even feel shame for that guy who called talking about e-hailing. It is so painful. They are no longer making money because of this petrol. Good morning, Sis Cathy. This is Matebola.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning, listeners of Radio SAFM. Maria April Springbok in the Northern Cape. Cathy, I want to respond to what Colin is saying. If Cyril would have gone to an Afrikaans church, I think it's one of the 10 commandments, not even the 10 commandments. Somewhere in the Bible is like, they will not judge. So who is he and the Afrikaners then to judge? They must share the word of God and welcome him into church and pray for him, not chase him away. That's not Christianity as far as I'm concerned. I thank you.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
All right, well, thanks for all of the WhatsApp voice notes that you've sent through to the show. Yes, you're right. The point that is being made, of course, pronunciation is important because some of the meaning is sometimes lost when we mispronunciate words because we can't identify what those words are. That's the obvious. So I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just saying that in a country like South Africa, we have a lot more work to do when it comes to whether or not, we say, well, somebody's view, is, whether we're going to be, the extent to which we're going to, I guess, be petty about whether somebody has pronounced a word rightfully or wrongfully so, rather than just perhaps taking the overall point that they're trying to make, which is what the purposes of an open line is, right? Yeah, but thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes. Some of them were actually quite funny. I enjoyed the dad who mispronounced Beyonce. I would have never guessed that Bounce stands for Beyonce, but it's part of the country that we live in, and we have to embrace it as such. It doesn't mean that correct pronunciation is not important. That's not what I'm saying. All right, the final conversation for today. We are reflecting on 30 years of democracy, but it's in line with April being Freedom Month. So towards the end of April, the 27th of April is Freedom Day. But we're asking, what does freedom mean to you? And reflecting then on 30 years of this freedom. And we thought we'd kick it off with the positives, right? With the optimism. So where have we gone right? Where have we gone right? Our guest for today, Dr. Musibudi Manyena, is a former Minister of Science and also former President of the Azanian People's Organization. Dr. Manyena, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Morning, Cathy.
And Xolelwa Kashe Katia is a project lead at Indlula Miti South Africa Scenarios. Xolelwa, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to your listeners. Good morning, Dr. Manyani. And
good morning, Kolela. Great to hear your voice again.
Yes, great. Thanks, Cathy, for having us.
Sure. Dr. Manyena, let me kick it off with you. One, of course, gets the sense that this year, as we mark Freedom Day, the mood will be different to what it has been, not only because it's 30 years of this country's democracy, but we'll be, at the peak of what is election season. So many of the campaigns would really be in their height by the time we get to the end of the year. The end of the month, sorry. But of course, the broader reflection is about where we are today, perhaps versus where this country was in April of 1994. Can you reflect on that for me as we kickstart the conversation?
Well, absolutely. We are in a different world today than where we were 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you would not be where you are, talking to us the way you are talking to us. And we would not be preparing an election campaign where we know everybody is free to vote or not to vote. Everybody is free to put themselves up there as candidates to stand for office at the provincial or at national level. And we will not be having the free press that we have. Will not be having the many institutions that support democracy, such as the Human Rights Commission, the IEC. We wouldn't be knowing about it, especially the majority African people in this country. They will not be part of what we are planning this month, and so on. And so we are in a different country altogether. We are not being arrested anymore. We are not being detained. We are not being beaten up. We are not being tortured. And we can live wherever we want to live if we have got the means. Of course, that's another story. So it's a different world, a positive world in some way.
Do you think that that is perhaps the obvious point of our reflections on 30 years of democracy and what this freedom means? The fact that life is so fundamentally different to what it used to be.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for some of us who were part and parcel of the struggle, who were detained, who were tortured, who went to Robben Island, who were banned, who went into exile and live in other countries, afraid to come to our own home and so on. It's a different world. Obviously, it's not perfect. From what you had said at the beginning, I thought you were not going to talk about the negatives. It is true that we have dropped the ball. We could have been further than where we are now. But the point of the matter is that we are a much better country than we were 30 years ago.
Xolelwa, for a younger generation of people who perhaps do not have memory of the struggle, have not been part of the struggle. A 30-year-old today would have been born in democratic South Africa, and much of what is said about the struggle is exactly that, something out of the history books, maybe the experiences of their parents, their grandparents, but certainly experiences that seem removed from them. So there is a level of resonance with stories like what Dr. Mangena has shared that is simply not there. How do we begin to, I suppose, cultivate a level of excitement around the fact that it is the tears of democracy in our country when the perspectives of this 30 years is so different depending on where one is and who one is?
Thank you, Cathy. And I think for me, I mean, I don't even want to try and speak for the youths or the Born Frees, or now recently known as the Tin Swallows, because I had the opportunity to experience both, the tail end of the apartheid era and also, newfound freedom. Well, 30 years on, I would say, I mean, first of all, I do agree with Dr. Manyani there about, all these institutions. And these are, of course, informed by our Constitution. Yes, the Constitution is highly contested because of the inequality that we have as a country. We don't seem to be enjoying the fruits of the Constitution in an equal manner. And but still, we cannot deny the embodiment of human rights within our Constitution, which sets us apart, far apart from even our neighbors in the continent. I mean, if you were to look at, for example, media freedom, in some countries, it's difficult to have honest conversations such as the ones that we are having today, whether it's on mainstream media, social media, because we do have that understanding, that common understanding of those rights, freedom of expression, but also, just the freedom of, to vote, which is what we did mention, that we are voting this year, 30 years on, and that's something that we did not have before. And also just the sheer volume of, the political parties that are contesting the election. It's also a demonstration of those freedoms. However, I mean, we cannot turn a blind eye to the inequalities that are there, because those are what drive us to a more divided nation, but also a state of lawlessness. But I think a perfect example of how we actually shone the light on this sort of like, I would say it's a silent agreement this time around, because we are known for our silent disagreements, across racial lines, gender lines, age lines. But a moment where a silent agreement was observed, and I think it is informed by our Constitution, is South Africa's stance on Palestine, and 30 years on, to still, maintain the courage to stand up for something that we understand as being fundamental to the formation of our nation, to our constitution. And yes, also that was contested because we are a noisy democracy, which is also a demonstration of the maturity of this democracy. But there was a general understanding of what South Africa stood for when it went to the ICJ. And I think for us, that's something that we need to be mindful of, as much as we have all the challenges, but when we stand up for that which I would refer to today as the silent agreement, then we do show up even on international platforms. And I think for me, that's what we also must never, ever, ever forget as we celebrate, these 30 years of democracy, and also the, symbolized by Freedom Day.
One of the things that you touch on, Xolelwa, that I think is important is when we ask South Africans today what freedom means to them, often it is linked to their very direct and personal experiences of today. So if somebody has been unable to access healthcare, has been unable to get a job, is living in an area that is, crime-ridden, the answer to the word will be different, perhaps to somebody else that is able to access those services a bit better. But freedom, more holistically, what is freedom? What does freedom mean? Maybe even to you personally.
I think for us in South Africa, freedom should actually mean, we do have the Bill of Rights. There was also the Freedom Charter, which also informed a whole lot of these processes. And as I've said, we've failed on so many fronts to even, just freedom to access education, or freedom to access, basic services such as water. We've been hearing a whole lot of things about, what's happening with water in our country. And because of the inequality that is still, not dealt with 30 years on, we find that it's very difficult to celebrate our freedom. But as the brief for today was that we try and, also shine a light on the positives. But also, I think what is also another positive that we might not notice is the right to protest, which is something that is also, sets us apart, because as South Africans, we do have a right to protest, and that in a way provides mechanisms to hold the state to account. So even when these challenges, where people do not have the freedoms, that we aspired to have gained by now, then they can still take the state on, even though that, has not led to maybe a mass democratic movement such as that of the 1980s. But I think that heritage still thrives within South Africa, and that is informed also by, what was decided upon us achieving our democracy.
Dr. Mangena, I'm going to bring you back in here again, and perhaps then just stay with this question of freedom and what freedom means, right? What does freedom mean to you as a South African?
Well, it means freedom to rule ourselves, to govern ourselves, freedom to participate fully to our full potential in the economy of our country. It means freedom from arbitrary arrest, persecution, and so forth, freedom to participate or get an education, freedom to walk the streets in safety, without fear of being molested or killed, that I live in a state that will protect me against crime and so on. And so those things on paper and in our constitution exist. But the way that they are actualized in real life is another matter. It's something that disappoints most of us. Those of us who took part in the struggle for freedom and suffered and so on, we never imagined that we will find ourselves in this position where almost everything that we thought will be better, it isn't. And we had thought that the struggle for freedom will give us the opportunity and the possibility to become a better people. But if our daughters and our granddaughters, our mothers and our sisters can't walk the streets, they are molested, they are killed, and so on, we can't say that we have got the kind of freedom that we want. If such a large percentage of our population goes to bed hungry every day, we can't say that we are truly free. Yes, we have got a beautiful constitution, as people say, and so forth, and the supporting legislation is on point, but in real life, our people will not be happy. Our women of Botswana can walk better in the streets at night than the women of South Africa. They don't have the kind of constitution we have got, but the women there and the children are much safer than the children of South Africa are. So there is a lot that is wrong presently that needs to be corrected, that is at odds with what freedom ought to be. But there is no perfect country in the world. It needs to be worked on. What is true is that 1994, after that struggle for freedom, has put us on another platform from which we can launch ourselves into the future, into the efforts to build a better country than we have now.
Sure. Thanks for that, Dr. Mangena. There's so much that I'm thinking about as you're speaking, especially then this gap, right? This disconnect between what exists in our Constitution, what people have, what people can claim as their rights versus their reality, and the extent to which then that does impede on people's freedom. So if I'm unable to access a right, can I say I'm not free? Because claiming that right is something that exists in the Constitution. And where would that leave the majority of South Africans? How does it color the conversation that we're having differently? So thanks for that contribution. I see some of you have already started to call in. I will take your calls, but that will be after the 11:30 news headlines.
Good morning, I'm Anne Musan. The headlines. The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has struck the urgent interdict application by the National Assembly Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, off the court roll. The judge in the matters also ordered the Speaker to pay the costs of the application. A 51-year-old suspect was arrested after he crashed into former President Jacob Zuma's car last week, has been granted bail of 500 rand at the Eshowe Magistrates Court in northern KwaZulu-Natal. And the first vessel trapped in the port of Baltimore left the port through a temporary channel yesterday. This after ship traffic at the port had been stopped following last week's bridge collapse. I'll have details on these and other stories at 12.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.3 FM in Rustenburg. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, we continue the conversation on the Talking Point as we kick off Freedom Month. We're reflecting on 30 years of democracy. What does freedom mean? And what are the things that we can look at, right, that perhaps become the low-hanging fruit of what this democracy has delivered? So we're kicking off with just what is the good that we can look at and point to as being the fruit of our democracy. Dr. Musibudi Mangena is one of our guests, joined by Xolelwa Kashe Katia. Xolelwa, I want to get your view on this issue of the gap, right? If there's a disconnect between accessing these rights, as Dr. Mangena has described, can I then say that I am not free?
I think, Cathy, if you're not part of the elite, you have every right to say you are not free. And I know that it's a difficult pill to swallow for us, because we'd like to believe that now that we are in a position to self-govern and we've done away with apartheid, we should not be, having such sentiments. But as long as you correctly says, if you don't have access, so if you're not part of the political elite, if you're not white, or if you're not in the urban area, or if you're not part of the academic elite and so on, you don't have freedoms. So even this constitution of ours, it's the elite that get to enjoy, all the benefits of our constitution. And I think that's why others would worry when we're saying, oh, let's do away with the constitution. The constitution is great, but the levels of inequality are what is making what's on paper not seem to be working. So those who can, pay, who've got the correct networks, who can get access, then they get to enjoy it. So how then I would say the gap that needs to be closed is that of inequality in all its different forms, whether it's inequality in terms of race, in terms of access to property, in terms of gender, and now recently in terms of age, wherein we are leaving our young people behind, and that is a ticking time bomb. So as long as we're not taking care of those inequalities, then the state of lawlessness will prevail, and there will be no utility to that constitution either. So even for the elite, as a matter of fact, so if the elite also want to ensure there's longevity in all the founding principles of this democracy, then there has to be commitment to narrow the inequality gap in South Africa. We can no longer remain as the most unequal country in the world, and we hope to thrive on that.
All right, thanks for that. I've got a question that's come in from one of our listeners, and I think it's for both of you, and then I'm going to take some of our callers. It says, good morning. Can we please explain these concepts further, and can we dissect them even deeper? What is freedom, the characteristics of freedom, and what is liberation and the characteristics of liberation? Anything or anyone that is oppressed will fight for their freedom because it's their birthright. Once it's taken away, they will fight for it. But does that mean they're free to govern, to lead, to be a greater example? That's the question that is being asked. Dr. Mangena, I'm going to put that one to you.
Oh, absolutely. I think that is really very complicated, but it is also on point. The freedom and liberation mean that you are free from oppression. You are free in your own country to govern you or to misgovern yourself, and to have access to all the things that we are talking about. But presently, there is a sense in which we are misgoverning ourselves because we have allowed ourselves to be overtaken by ineptitude, by corruption, and as a result, we've been putting a lot of square pegs in round holes, and they are not performing, whether it is the criminal justice system, whether it is the running of our economy or running of state-owned enterprises that are supposed to assist us in becoming a better people by means of the delivery of services such as electricity and water. Presently, even big metros like Johannesburg are struggling with water, whereas all along it was people in the villages of Limpopo and Eastern Cape that struggled with water. Presently, we can see that the ineptitude, incompetence, the lot of people who are put in places where they are not supposed to be. So it's those things that rob us of the possibility of enjoying freedom that we fought so hard for. And as I said earlier, most of us who were part of the struggle are very disappointed at the moment at where we are. We are proud of what we did prior to 1994, but we're not so proud of what is happening now, where everything seems to be falling apart. And as Xolelwa says, the leaving behind of our young people who are unemployed in large numbers, and some of them can't even access education and so forth. They are a ticking bomb. But they've got a platform now to mobilize. That's what we must do. Mobilize to right the wrongs that exist in our country. Get rid of the mess, because if truth be spoken, we are in a mess at the moment. And if we are not careful, this country, this society might disintegrate in a very bad way, in accordance with the logic of the ticking time bomb that Xolelwa is talking about.
All right. Thanks for that contribution, Dr. Mangena. Let me go to the Eastern Cape. Mvusiwe Kaya, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and your panel. You know, two things for me. One of the meanings that I get from being free in our country is a responsibility I have as an individual and as a public servant to realize the constitutional commitments that we have as public servants, to play a role in ensuring that people access programs and services of our department. I work for agriculture, and one of the things we've been doing is to assist farmers to be commercial farmers, something that they were denied before. And when you listen to the stories of how these farmers are now benefiting from financial services and are able to access markets, money that they get from there is invested in their businesses. It tells a beautiful story. And I think there's something that we can learn, from the founding cabinet of this country, the first, the third, and the fourth. They had clarity of policy direction that was needed. They were committed to doing the work to improve the lives of our people. And I think this is a legacy that generations that follow those people have to continue, so that serving people becomes a top priority of every individual that works for government. I think we have a responsibility that we must never forget where we come from. We must use everything that we have. The money that we government pays for our education must give results to the people of our country to address the problems that Dr. Mangena and Xolelwa are raising, and issues that everyone is talking about raising as problems in our country. We need to work together to deal with these problems. Yeah. The last thing that we need to do on unemployment things is that, issues of unemployment, we must ask ourselves, why is it that many companies in South Africa are not creating jobs? Why is it that young people are staying unemployed when we are addressing issues of skill development, we are addressing issues of infrastructure? I'm not saying all these are perfect, but there is investment that's being made.
Of course, Mvusiwe Kaya, just to sort of clear back or steer back to the heart of the conversation today, it's that yes, we hear you on the work that you're doing as a civil servant through the Department of Agriculture. But when you go to those farmers who have been trying to, get a break, whether it's in the industry or whether it's to upscale their businesses, whatever the challenge might be, it's that those farmers, if you ask them if they're free, some of them are likely to say no. And it is because of the conditions that they face today that they will say no. And that's the challenge that as a department you would have.
Sure. And you will agree with me that the most of those challenges, they are not the same as the ones they experienced before. The issue of access to land is being addressed Some farmers, for instance,
the point is that it hasn't been addressed, at least not the scale that it should have been, Mvusiwe Khaya.
Look, we're on the same page on this. But I'm saying to you, the progress that is being made is giving good change and development in the farmers that are benefiting from this. And that needs to push us as government employees to move faster so that we reach more people who are able to assist more people with all the basic services that they need.
All right, let's leave it there. Mvusiwe Khaya out in the Eastern Cape. Cleo, you're in Mofolo. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy and your guests, and how are you?
Good, Cleo. Go for it.
Yes, two extremes. I think mainly the freedom that we have has helped us to have freedom of speech. That is on the positive side. Freedom of speech. We are free to say, to articulate whatever we want to articulate. But on the negative side, the freedom that we have has only produced an environment where only the elite thrive. And that in itself means that we have polarized the society where the few are doing well and the majority are left behind. And that situation is not good for the country. And especially because the elite are not the most productive members of society. Their importance only lies in how they influence policy. But when it comes to production, so that we can be able to share the spoils, there we have failed. And let me end by citing the words of Miles Monroe, who said, there is no way to walk into freedom without shouldering its responsibilities. Our elite have failed to take the responsibility to build a better life for all. And a very good example, look what is happening in Orania. Those Afrikaners there have managed to build a very prospective town out of nothing. Whereas we have a treasury, we've got access to taxes, but we're doing things better for ourselves.
All right. Cleo, thanks for that contribution, and apologies, we have to leave it there. We're losing a part of the connection to you. Renelwe in eThekwini, good morning.
Morning, Cathy, and your guest as well. Actually, the question which was posed earlier on, it's whether the country that we are living in at the moment is better than 30 years ago. Some people will actually disagree with that because they will actually, it depends who you pose that question to, you know. If you pose that question to a person who's living in a suburban area, yes, he would say, no, it's much better than it was 30 years ago. But if you go down to the deep rural of the villages and the townships of this country, which those places are ravaged by unemployment, poverty, and crime, they will totally disagree with the notion of being a better country after 30 years. So, as there were two callers that started your show on an open line this morning with regards to a PEE in the private sector. Those guys were actually on point in terms of what is already happening in the private sector with regards to awarding jobs to the black South Africans. So as I say, there will be two ideas in terms of whether we are a better country 30 years later.
All right.
Or not.
Renelwe, thank you for calling in with a contribution. Of course, we're left with just 2 minutes for us to then conclude this conversation. Dr. Mangena, let me come to you first to give your parting shot. Should we try and make it a positive moment? Is that what we must do at all cost? Because it's 30 years, because it's significant?
Yes, I think that from the contributions that were made earlier, it is clear that the black elites are the problem here. And they are the people who are in charge presently. They are the presidents, they are the ministers, they are business people, and so forth. They are hoarding. They are enjoying what falls from or follows from that liberation struggle. And until such time that the black elites start playing a role that will make sure that every one of us, whether we are in rural areas or in townships or anywhere else, enjoy the fruits of liberation, we will not get any better. But we are at a point where we can safely mobilize to create a better country than the one we had 30 years ago.
Thank you, Cathy. I think for me, a parting shot, but just also listening to the callers, is it is clear that without collaboration, as mentioned by Mvusiwe Khaya, we will not go anywhere. And it's clear that the state is not even nearly capable of handling these challenges, such as dealing with the unemployment, the inequalities in all its forms. And you remember the work that we've done as scenarios. We've already established that we are in a state of lawlessness, which, in terms of the new scenarios that we've just released, it's getting worse, Cathy, because now there's two very negative scenarios that have emerged. Even one with the likelihood of an authoritarian populist coalition, or just a noisy a coalition or nation that just doesn't go anywhere, really. But to achieve the most positive scenario there, it is actually collaboration, but that is also doesn't come easy, and I think for us, in my own personal opinion, is that because of our settlement in 1994, before 1994, we did not have a liberation, because one of the callers spoke about the difference between freedom and liberation. Our liberation was not informed by military action. It was not violent. It was a negotiated settlement. And now when you look at these new scenarios, there's a lot of noise around a possible, leaderless or even youth-led revolution. And only then can we then start seeing the fruits of collaboration, wherein there has to be that liberation from the status quo to actually push or compel the state or the private sector or the elite in its entirety to actually listen to the cries of the people. And it's unfortunate that it has to go there, but from the research that we've been finding, that there's this unease and foreboding that is haunting the nation at the moment.
All right. Let me thank you both for your contributions to this conversation. Dr. Musibudi Mangena, former Minister of Science and Technology and also President of the Azanian People's Organization, and Xolelwa Kashe-Katia, who's project lead at Indulamiti South Africa Scenarios. So I'm looking forward to all of the conversations we're going to have about Freedom Month. I think this has been really a good start. All right, the Talking Point is back with you again tomorrow morning between 9 and midday. Up next, the book reading.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Why Men Hate Women, written by Kopano Ratili.
Chapter 10. Listening carefully is an articulate act of love in action. Every man needs someone to talk with, as I've already said. Talking with someone else about your problems actually helps. I believe that. More than talking, though, we all need to listen more, because hearing what others have to say helps. The people we need to listen to are the women in our lives, family, friends, girlfriends, colleagues. Hearing them help us build our relationships with them. Listening carefully is the most articulate act of love in action. I believe that even more. To listen is something I work on, because even at my best, I still catch my attention drifting even though I want to listen. That indicates that I'm not fully present. It means I'm likely to misunderstand. So I know learning to listen fully takes practice. I know I've said something earlier about learning how to talk. Here I will say just one more thing. I find that it helps me see matters more clearly if I talk with someone. It helps me clarify what I think. Sometimes I find that I have a better grasp of my own feelings if I speak about them. I may have thought what an interaction generated in me were feelings of being upset. But during the back and forth of conversation, I come to understand that what I was feeling was anxiety. I get perspective by hearing another perspective. I make sense of things in the world around me, but also of what is going on inside me. Actually, when I slow down my thinking, I find that it helps me see more clearly, even if all I'm doing is listening to the other person talk. When I take time to turn things around in my mind, as you do when you have roasted brockies on the braai and turn them around and around, I appreciate the different sides of what's cooking. A curious thing I have found about listening to another person is that my mind makes connections that go far beyond the topic being discussed. I have a feeling that this happens to all of us. You may have had the experience of listening to a conversation about sport and your mind drifts and you start thinking of something that has nothing to do with sports. Perhaps something that you forgot to do last week. Or you may be talking to your boss and your mind conjures a dream you could not remember that morning. The mind is always making connections between things at a subconscious level of which you are not necessarily fully aware. That may be one good reason for listening to others, because it may bring to the surface the latent connection the mind has been making. Listening to others is helpful in more direct ways. Other people have different views from mine. They can, if my ears and most crucially, my heart in concert with my ears are open to what they bring, offer a different way to make sense of or fix my problem, or just to be. If that problem involves a relationship, it is almost 100% certain that there is another viewpoint on the problem. I know it is not easy when you are not used to it, but what can you lose if you are already losing your way? Chapter 11. Why does love hurt? Love hurts. Love scars. The hard rock band Nazareth sang in their 1974 international hit version of Feliz and Boglo Bryant's widely covered anthem. The song expresses a particular kind of love. Passionate or romantic love, instead of companionate love, sibling love, love between friends, parental love or godly love. A hurting, fiery love is, to be honest, a staple variety in the love song genre. There seems to be widespread cultural agreement that when it comes to this type of love, a risk exists for emotional turbulence when an individual is madly in love. It is crucial to underscore that it is psychological injury, meaning emotional pain, mental distress, verbal abuse, neglect, and other forms of non-physical violence, instead of physical violence with which we are concerned in this case. A culture that accepts that deep love can hurt or will hurt, we must note, not only covertly reinforces emotional violence as part of love, it also suggests to us that psychological pain is not as bad as physical pain. In their book, Masters and Johnson on Sexuality and Human Loving, the acclaimed sex researcher William Masters and Virginia Johnson and their collaborator Robert Kolodny write, "The great love of fiction and verse have been romantic loves marked by a whirlwind of emotions from passion to jealousy to anguish. One undergraduate psychology textbook says that for many people, passionate love resembles a ride on a kind of emotional roller coaster. They experience intense joy if the feelings are reciprocated, and intense pain and despair if the feelings are unrequited." Therefore, it seems passionate love is perceived to come with the possibility of pain. That is why the dominant narrative for this love uses the phrase falling in love. We risk falling and hurting ourselves. Do we not gain from assuming that love carries with it the risk of distress? Do not many of us suffer from unreciprocated love, the unwelcome absence of the beloved, the ending of love, losing a loved one? Pain is never far off in this kind of love. With this assumption in mind, that being loved passionately by a man or a woman and the risk of being hurt can coexist in the same relationship, we are in a position to ask, in what circumstances is the emotional pain that comes with love tolerable, and when can it no longer be abided? What kinds of men and women intentionally hurt, yet passionately love at the same time? How are we to intervene if we find psychological violence and love in one and the same place? Psychological violence is taken to mean intentionally demeaning and abusive non-physical acts against another person. The aggressor aims to hurt the mind or emotions. This type of violence is usually executed verbally, but it may also be expressed through gestures, silence, omissions. Threats, coercion, neglect, and withholding affection are examples of psychological violence. Psychological violence may be the most pervasive form of violence in close relationships, if not in all interactions, because it is hard to define, and because quite often people do not consider it to be violence, and they do not seek professional attention when they are psychologically abused. And we must know that the consequences of psychological abuse do not stop at the psyche, for physical symptoms can result from it. The co-occurrence of love and violence in the same relationship is not an unusual phenomenon. Once again, we will do well to remember the co-occurrence of love and hatred within one person, starting with ambivalent love experienced in childhood. In their study examining love among couples in which the male partner had been violent toward the female partner, Dalit Yasu Borokowitz and Zvi Eisikovets asked that very question. How can both partners speak of love in such violent relationships? They say they approach the couples with the assumption that the relationships were suffused with undesirable emotions. What they found instead was that most of the women and men in their study reported mainly positive emotions, and that was the reason for the couple remaining together. And in a study, Halima Deschamps states that love is a barrier that inhibits the ability of women in violent relationships to end them. It is not infrequent for many people who see their relationships as not violent to hurt the people they love. It is a rare intimate relationship in which people never knowingly use words or non-verbal acts to emotionally injure their loved ones. It may be that because it is not physical, this behavior is bearable. It may not even be defined as violent. The reality is, our partners and we ourselves do not immediately up and leave when we hurt each other. We stay even though we are wounded. This is not to argue that staying in a violent relationship is sometimes a good choice, or that leaving is what everybody should always do. The reasons women and men stay in abusive relationships are complicated. Like many people who work against violence, I hold the view that women and men who get hurt have agency to make decisions about their lives. Anti-violence pro-feminist work is work that puts people's agency at the center, not the theory of academics or interests of advocates. I am, of course, also aware that agency is shaped by social structures, including patriarchy, capitalism, and racism. Working toward a non-violent society and a mutually caring relational life between partners must move between what happens between two people and what happens in their society. By paying careful attention to the dynamic of interpersonal and intrapersonal history, by listening closely to men and women who say they love each other, even though they emotionally hate one another, something of great significance can be learned.
That was another episode of Why Men Hate Women and Other Reflections on Love, Violence and Masculinity, read by Samson Khumalo. The book is published by Wits University Press and is also available online, www.wetspress.co.za. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on The Talking Point. It is produced for SAFM by Jeffrey Matenji. Technical production by Wiseman Manqele.
It's 3 minutes after 12 on Tuesday, the 2nd of April, 2024. Very warm welcome to Updated Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next 48 and 58 minutes.
The NDPP has stated under oath that her attorney can take her to the Littleton police station and the attorney can take her to the court. This is already a courtesy and an exception to what ordinary citizens are afforded.
National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula's bid to block her arrest has been struck from the role in the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, and the Umkhonto weSizwe political party says it will appeal the Electoral Commission of South Africa's decision to remove former President Jacob Zuma from its candidates list. Coming up in sport.
4 premiership matches coming up today. Sundowns have to have a quick turnaround and also look ahead to what's happening in England, and there's new changes to New Zealand gymnastics.
Looking forward to that, but let us know your thoughts. You can write to us, 41391 is the SMS line number. You can also get in touch via X or Facebook at SABC News_radio, or send us a WhatsApp voice note on 082-692-3909. All these and more stories coming up on this Tuesday edition of Updated Noon. First though, here's Ann Musa with your latest news.
Thanks, Sakina. In our top stories, Mapisa-Nqakula's urgent bid to block her arrest dismissed and Limpopo man accused of killing his wife arrested. Good afternoon. The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has struck the urgent interdict application by the National Assembly Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, off the court roll. The judge in the matter has also ordered the Speaker to pay the costs of the application. Judge Sulet Potterell found Mapisa-Nqakula would have substantial redress in the main application, which is expected to be heard on the 9th of April this year, and therefore found the matter before the court was not urgent. The Speaker last week launched the application seeking to prevent the state from effecting an arrest against her. This follows corruption allegations levelled against her during her tenure as Defence Minister. Judge Potterell handed down the judgment.
Even if I should consider it, then also pursuant to a question by this court, whether this court would not be deciding already the matter as it seeks the same relief pertaining to arrest in the main application. Counsel for the applicant strongly argued that that court would make a final ruling as this is just an interdict. In that case, the applicant will have substantial redress in a hearing to follow. As for the cost must follow the result. According the application is struck from the roll, the applicant is to pay the costs, including the costs of due counsel.
A 51-year-old suspect who was arrested after he crashed into former President Jacob Zuma's car last week has been granted bail of 500 rand at the Eshowe Magistrates Court in northern KwaZulu-Natal. Mbuyiseni Ntuli has been charged with drunken driving and reckless and negligent driving. Police say the man's vehicle collided with Zuma's official armoured state vehicle. The incident happened on Thursday night on the R66 when Zuma was believed to be travelling between Nkandla and Eshowe. The case has been adjourned to the 3rd of May for further investigations. The University of Fort Hare in the Eastern Cape has welcomed the arrests of 15 additional suspects in connection with the murders at the institution. The arrested suspects include university staff members and some who are currently on suspension. The suspects are due to appear in court today. The arrests are in connection with the murder of Mboneli Visele, who was the bodyguard of the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Zakele Buhlungu, and the fleet manager Pietrus Ruotz. University spokesperson J.P. Ruot says the arrests bring a sense of comfort.
I think it's very important for us to just say that we are looking for closure. Almost a year and a half after the brutal murders of staff, failed assassination attempts. So we are saying we are very grateful to the very hard work by the National Task Team and also the provincial SAPS.
Gauteng's Traffic Police Department says traffic volumes started picking up this morning from 11 o'clock after the Easter weekend. Travellers have been assured that traffic police visibility will be intensified. The N3, N1, N4 and N12 routes will be affected by high traffic volumes. Gauteng Traffic Police spokesperson Silo Maremane urged motorists to drive with caution.
Motorists are encouraged to ensure that their vehicles are roadworthy before undertaking any trip. They are also encouraged to avoid overspeeding, avoid unsafe overtaking, reckless and negligent driving. Good behavior on the road will always preserve life, as road safety remains the responsibility of every road user.
A 54-year-old man who allegedly shot and killed his wife during a church service at Makonde Shadane village outside Tohiando, Limpopo, has handed himself over to police. Police spokesperson Malisela Lidwaba says they've